the First Amendment has its rightful place in the Bill of Rights. I mean, after all, it is first. But it almost wasn't. When James Madison originally proposed his 12 amendments, what we now call the First Amendment was actually number 3. The first 2 were about congressional representation and congressional pay. Exciting topics, but they both failed to get ratified by enough states. So, bang, here we have number 3 moving up all the way to the top spot. Now here's a story that really shaped religious freedom in America. In 1635, a minister named Roger Williams was living in Massachusetts, and he had some pretty radical ideas. He said the government had no business enforcing religious laws, that faith was between a person and God. Period. Well, the Puritan authorities were not happy. They literally ordered him arrested and planned to have him shipped back to England. But Williams caught wind of the plan and fled during a blizzard. He trekked through the wilderness in winter and eventually founded a place called Rhode Island, which became the first colony with true religious freedom. When the founders were debating the First Amendment about 150 years later, they actually remembered stories like Williams and thought, we're not doing that again. Well, here's another story about someone you may have heard of, Benjamin Franklin. Well, Ben's older brother James ran a newspaper in Boston called the New England Courant. In 1722, James printed something that, well, annoyed the colonial authorities, and, well, they threw him in jail. Young Ben, who was just a teenager working as an apprentice at the time, had to take over the paper. This experience, watching his brother imprisoned for what he printed, stuck with Franklin his whole life. He became one of the strongest advocates for press freedom. Now, when James Madison was drafting the Bill of Rights, he collected proposals from all the state ratifying conventions. Virginia wanted protection for the freedom of the press. New York wanted the right to speak, write, or publish their sentiments. North Carolina wanted protections for liberty of conscience. Massachusetts wanted the right to assemble peacefully. Well, Madison looked at all these proposals and made a genius move. Instead of creating separate amendments for each freedom, he bundled them together. He understood that these freedoms were, interconnected. You can't have freedom of religion without freedom of speech. And you can't have freedom of the press without the right to peacefully assemble and protest. Now, there's also this fascinating debate that happened in Congress. Some representatives wanted the amendment to say Congress could not or couldn't violate the freedom of speech. But Madison insisted on stronger language. Congress shall make no law, not Congress shouldn't make laws, or Congress can rarely make laws. No law. That word was intentional, purposeful, and powerful. And then things got just a little bit confusing. Just 7 years after the First Amendment was ratified, Congress passed the Sedition Act of 1798, which made it illegal to criticize the president or Congress. Yeah, the same government that promised not to restrict speech tried to criminalize criticism. Well, the act expired in 1801, and Thomas Jefferson pardoned everyone convicted under it. But it showed how fragile these freedoms were and how fragile these freedoms are, and how vigilant we need to be to indeed protect them. The First Amendment wasn't just creative because of what it said. It was creative because the founders were brave enough to tie their own hands. They just won the power to govern, and yet their first official act was to essentially limit that power, their power, the government's power.